Have you ever wondered what it's like to work in law enforcement? Here on Behind the Star, we share stories about the Orange County Sheriff's Office, Central Florida's largest law enforcement agency. From forensics to dispatch to the deputies on patrol, we'll talk to the brave men and women who protect our community. This is Behind the Star, the official podcast of the Orange County Sheriff's Office. Welcome to Behind the Star, the official podcast of the Orange County Sheriff's Office. My name is Jon Busdeker, your host here at Behind the Star. I'm actually the storyteller here at the Sheriff's Office as well, so most of my day is shooting video and putting that video up on social media and our website, but we also do this podcast as well to kind of give you a sneak peek into what we do here at the Sheriff's Office. We talk to civilians, we talk to sworn personnel, we talk to a little bit of everybody here at the Sheriff's Office. And before I get too far, I want to thank all the listeners because this week we sort of surpassed a milestone. We actually hit more than 5,000 downloads this week. So we've had 5,000 downloads since we started this podcast, and we're really proud of that. And we got a long way to go because there are more than 2,500 people that work here at the Sheriff's Office, and I've interviewed about 26 of them. So we got a long way to go before I finish up. I'm not gonna run out of people, is what I'm saying here at the Sheriff's Office. So if you're not following us on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, be sure to do that. We put all kinds of really great content out there. We're actually celebrating Black History Month right now, so we're highlighting some of our African American deputies and civilians here, and we put up some good stories on that. And just follow us there and subscribe to Behind the Star if you're not already a subscriber. So today I'm excited. We're on location again. We're still in the building that I work in. I work at Central Ops at John Young and Colonial here in Orlando, but I'm downstairs. I work upstairs. I'm downstairs in the forensics department, which is we've done some podcasts with the folks in forensics in the past, but this is a little bit different part of forensics. I'm actually here with Amanda Vibert. Is that how I say it?
Yes, that is correct.
Okay, Amanda Vibert and Mila Tran, and they are both forensics firearms specialists, and I have so many questions for both of you, but welcome to Behind the Star.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
All right. Are you happy to be here?
We are.
We'll see. They might be a little nervous, but hopefully by the end of this, they're not as nervous as they were when they started. But thank you so much for chatting with me about what you do here in the forensics department and also the firearms, which is what we're going to talk about for the next 30 minutes or so. So tell me, why don't you explain, Amanda, what exactly is the forensics firearms section?
The forensics firearms section, what we do is we work hand in hand with the forensics unit and the crime scene investigators. Every crime gun or every gun that is taken off the street in Orange County comes directly to us. We will triage those guns and determine if it is considered a crime gun or maybe just a gun that's left behind by an owner unintentionally or accidentally. If it is a crime gun, then we'll work that as a crime gun, and there's specific things that we do with that firearm. We will swab it for DNA. We will process it for fingerprints. We will do a function test on it to make sure it works properly. We will then shoot the firearm here in our own range that we have here.
And we're going to talk about that.
Okay. And then we enter the test fires that come out of shooting the firearm into a database to see if they can link to other crimes in the area. If it's a non-crime gun, we just verify all the information's correct on it so we can get that released back to the owners.
So, Mila, how do you determine if it's a crime gun or just a gun that somebody dropped on the ground? What's the difference?
Well, there's a lot of research being involved, and a lot of that is information that we get from the reports that our deputies write when they collect these guns. So it's very helpful to us when our deputies do write very thorough reports. But basically, if it was used in any sort of reasonably suspicious activity, we'll be able to classify that as a crime gun. Otherwise, if there's a definite known owner and that known owner doesn't have any sort of criminal history and he just left his gun in a hotel for some reason, which happens actually a lot.
Yeah, you hear
yes,
about those
does.
stories. People
Yes.
just seem to forget that they have their firearms sometimes.
Yes.
We get a lot of firearms collected in the safes of hotel rooms a lot,
Yes.
especially in the Disney area.
Really?
I guess they just forget
Yes.
that they leave it in the safe and, it's not really a crime gun. They accidentally left it in the safe, but if we can get that owner, then...
We also don't consider any sort of court order to surrender your firearms to be considered a crime gun.
Okay. So what? So let's say I leave my gun at Disney, which you think at the happiest place on earth you wouldn't need your firearm, but who knows? You can bring it, I guess. Do you try to track the people down and get it back to them, or what happens with that?
If your firearm's left in a hotel at Disney, typically they'll try to find the owner. Either the hotel will find the owner or the deputy that gets called will find the owner.
Okay, and we'll say anywhere, not just Disney. It could be any hotel room in Orange County.
In Orange County, yes. If you bring it to Disney, then they're going to make you bring it back.
All right.
You definitely cannot bring that on property.
That's a different scenario.
That's a different scenario, yes.
But they actively try to get it back to the person who may have forgot it.
Yes, if there's a potential owner, and it's not a hotel like in a high crime area. Orange County does have some high crime areas where the hotels are more of a, I guess, a pay by the hour, pay by the night
we know
type
what you're
hotels.
talking about.
Yes.
We know what you're talking about.
A firearm found in one of those, if there is no known owner, then we definitely can work that as a crime gun.
So throughout the year, and I don't need an exact number, how many crime guns are we talking about here in Orange County? If you had to sort of round it somewhere.
We bring in probably around 1,000 crime guns a year.
Okay.
Maybe a little more, a little less, depending on how many guns the deputies get off the street.
Okay. And is it just you two doing all the research and work on this?
As of right now, yes, it is. FDLE, the state lab, still helps us with getting everything worked, but we are the two main ones in here.
Okay, that's a lot of guns.
I think we are hoping to one day grow in our office and maybe get a third person.
Okay.
Yes.
All right. Well, I mean, with that many, Orange County's growing, and hopefully we get the guns off the street that don't need to be on the street, and I'm sure it may take more people one day, and we'll see with that. But so walk me through this process. Let's say somebody commits a crime with a gun. What happens? Mila, I'm going to have you sort of walk me through this process. What happens? I mean, from start to finish, how does this work? Where does the gun, how does it end up here? And what does your team do here at Central Ops?
Well, there are two ways a gun can come in through our agency. One of those ways is when a CSI goes out on scene and collects the gun following a crime as they're processing a crime scene. The guns that Amanda and I get are usually collected by our deputies. They might be found after the fact, let's say in the bushes, and that's, guns don't typically grow in bushes. So that's pretty suspicious.
That's why you're a specialist in the firearms. I thought they did.
So those guns we can consider to be reasonably suspicious. So we'll work them, like she said, process them for both DNA and fingerprints. And as long as they are safely functionable, we'll test fire them and enter them into a national database where we can potentially generate investigative leads by possibly hitting to other cases, and then information can be gathered and compared between the two cases.
So Amanda, when Mila says you test them for DNA, is it like how I see on TV? You're swabbing things and spraying things, and is that how that works?
Yes. So any firearm that can be entered into the database, that if we function test and we can enter it into the database, we will take touch DNA swabs off the firearm. Just in case we get a hit on that, we can hopefully link it back to a person and not just... So the database pretty much links guns to guns, or cartridge cases to guns, or cartridge cases to cases. So sometimes we need more than that to try to get a name. So we'll swab for DNA on it first.
And then you try to find matches and try to work cases that way.
Yes.
So then you mentioned that you test fire them. Walk me through this process. How does that work? Because do you do them here in where we're at, here downstairs at Central Ops, or do you go somewhere else?
Yes, we are actually one of the only agencies, I believe, in the state of Florida that have, for a sheriff's department, that have our own firing range inside of our office. It's actually to the door next to you here.
If you were sitting in the office like we are right now, it just looks like a closet. It just looks like a door that goes into where the mops are kept, but it's not.
No, it is not. Behind that door is a indoor range that we will do all of our shooting in. We also have a water tank out in the garage right behind us that if we needed to shoot into the water tank, we could shoot into that as well.
Why would you shoot into a water tank and not in the range?
Typically, a water tank would be used if we're trying to keep the projectile, which is the actual bullet that would technically go through someone or through a thing, intact for purposes of comparison. FDLE still does that portion of the examination. We're not trained for that yet, so we don't typically use the water tank too often, but we have it there just in case we needed to do that for a case-by-case basis.
So Mila, why shoot the guns at all? What's the purpose of that?
So guns are fairly unique. Actually, to my knowledge, they're incredibly unique, just like fingerprints are incredibly unique. And when a gun is shot, the bullet, as people think of them, what that actually is considered a cartridge. And the term bullet is applied to the whole cartridge as people generally understand it, but the bullet is actually the portion, like Amanda said, that expels from the gun. The other portion that expels from the gun is the cartridge case, which Amanda has referred to a couple of times. This cartridge case, during the process of firing, takes on unique markings from the gun.
And that's from inside, like the chamber?
That is actually from what's called the breech face of the gun.
Ah.
So those markings, again, like are very unique. They're like a fingerprint for that gun. So what this database does is it'll image that kind of fingerprint and it'll compare it against all the other images in the database. And that's how we get these hits from case to case or gun to case.
And I'm not super into guns. I don't know a ton about them. I mean, I've fired a handful in my life, so not a ton. So do the gun manufacturers, are they the ones that put the markings inside so they can do so you can get like the fingerprints of bullets or casings, or how does that work?
Well, each manufacturer is different because part of that marking is from the firing pin impression, which each manufacturer has their own unique firing pin. Some people that may be familiar with firing pins know that Glock types will have a rectangular firing pin or used to have a rectangular shaped firing pin versus other manufacturers just had a regular circular firing pin. That, along with the other markings of just manufacturer markings of making the firearm itself, leave specific marks on the actual cartridge case. And then kind of like, I like to say like a shoe wear impression, wear and tear on a shoe, wear and tear on the firearm causes those individual characteristics that would match to that specific firearm versus if I had 5 Glock type firearms, I need to try to link it to the specific one, say they're all the same caliber. That person shooting that gun over and over again with different types of caliber, different types of ammunition are going to leave those individual characteristics on that so we can make those individual matches to say it's that Glock type firearm versus the other Glock type firearm.
Okay, so like, first of all, if anybody's listening, I apologize if I ask stupid questions about it because I just don't know a lot about the process. So don't be like, well, he should know that because he works at the sheriff's office. Not the case. So after you fired it, I mean, do you put it under a microscope, or how do you match up the markings, or how do you figure out that maybe one casing matches with another gun, or how does that work?
So what we do is it's called the NIBIN database. It's a national database where we enter the cartridge cases in. Every time we shoot a gun in the agency, we shoot 2 rounds into it. We will look at the microscope at the 2 rounds and pick which one we think has the best markings or just the most precise. Because when you shoot, sometimes you don't have the best markings on it. So, we have a brass marking cartridge case and we also have a nickel marking cartridge case, and we'll pick the best one. We put it into a machine. The machine does all the photographs, takes all the photographs of everything that we're documenting. And then it's kind of like, if anyone knows about the APHIS database with fingerprints, it kind of gives you the top 100, top 1,000 that it could potentially match to or link to. And then we, with our visible eye, would have to look at them and determine if it's considered a potential association or not.
So Mila, after it's been shot, after it's been maybe put up in this database, what happens then? Is it just stored waiting for a trial or a case, or what happens to the gun then?
Well, the gun gets returned into our evidence section for storage until it's needed, like you said, for trial. The images entered into the database kind of just hover around there indefinitely. And if for some reason the gun gets recirculated out into the general population and gets used in a crime again, those images will still be there and hit at a later time, potentially. And again, this is where it's such a great investigative tool because you can pull information from both of these cases, even if they're like 5 years apart, and just compare any commonalities.
So I want to go and figure out how you guys ended up here in the firearms section. I'm gonna start with you, Amanda. How did you end up here? Were you really into guns, or were you interested in them, or did you just sort of end up here?
I actually started as a crime scene investigator back in 2004 here at the Sheriff's Office. I did an internship with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement and here, and I ended up here. I really wanted to work for Orange County.
Are you from Orange County originally?
I'm from Kissimmee, Florida originally, so Osceola County down the road.
Next door.
So I've been working here since 2004 as a crime scene investigator, and The opportunity was open a couple years ago to come into here. I will honestly say firearms was not my expertise. I did not actually really enjoy firearms. It just was something new and exciting that I could learn. The schedule, I have family, so the schedule was a little bit better than being on call. I just couldn't handle the call out and the nights and the weekends. So.
Yeah, because crime doesn't have a time schedule.
Yes. So since this was more of a lab type setting and it was something new to me, it's something new I could learn to kind of benefit myself and hopefully benefit the agency by using my other knowledge to also come in here to gain knowledge in this. So that's kind of how I ended up in here a couple years ago.
And so how many years have you been here?
I'm
in the
firearms section. I started in April of 2016, so I'm about to hit my 3-year mark.
Okay, all right. How about you, Mila? How did you end up here in the firearms section?
Well, I used to be a crime scene investigator as well, and I always had an interest in firearms. I never had an interest in guns per se, but firearms as a forensic discipline I was always interested in. That and for some reason question documents. I think I just like the little bit of comparative work and torturing myself that way.
So how long have you been in the firearms section?
A little over 2 years.
All right. So I mean, did both of you go to school for crime scene investigation, or how did that start out? Just an interest in wanting to work in law enforcement, but as a civilian?
Honestly, when I grew up, I wanted to be a pediatrician. Then I wanted to be a mortician because I liked examining and studying death. And around that time when I was in college, the forensic science was starting to come about, and it seemed like the best of both worlds. I know this is a little morbid. When I was a crime scene investigator, I just like seeing death and how people die and investigating how they die and why they die. So that's kind of how I got into this whole
I feel like that's everybody's answer when I come talk
I know
to
that's
them
probably
in
not
forensics.
the greatest answer, but I just enjoyed investigating death investigations to determine, what happened and try to find the clues to find out who they did it or who did it. And, now I'm doing that in a firearms aspect versus just, out on the field aspect.
Same thing, Mila? Did you study this in school and was interested in it, or?
I did study forensic science. That's my bachelor degree is in forensic science.
Here locally or somewhere else?
I started up in Baltimore. I actually used to work for the Baltimore Police Department doing crime scene as well. And I didn't intend to go into crime scene initially. I've always wanted to do the firearms stuff, but I think I ended up liking crime scene a lot because it was a lot of puzzle solving and, looking for clues. I never really watched CSI until after after I started doing CSI stuff, but I don't know. It was just always a challenge. It's always something different.
It's definitely something different each day.
You're always learning something new, and I appreciate the challenge. And then when I got the opportunity to come into the firearms section, again, that was a new challenge for me, and that was also happened to be in line with what I wanted to do. So I jumped on the opportunity.
So what kind of guns and is there a difference between guns and firearms, or can I just say firearms? Does that mean sort of everything? Is there a distinction between it?
I mean, there's not technically a distinction. Firearm would be the correct term.
Okay.
There are non-firearms, such as like a BB gun or a CO2 powered pistol.
Would you still test that or not?
We do get those. We get requests to test those once in a while. It's not something we typically do, but on occasion, if the state attorney requests it, we can try to function test the BB gun. We don't have the knowledge and background like we do in the firearms, so we do have to do a lot more research on that specific BB gun because they're all made a little bit differently.
Really?
Yes.
All right. Well, like the Red Ryder BB gun, you shoot your eye out.
Yes, you shoot
We
your
just
eye
got
out. The
one
Red
of
Ryder.
those.
We did just get one of those as one of our crime guns.
Huh. Interesting. I mean, I had no idea. But like, what types of guns come in? Is it just like everything? I mean, any kind of firearm can come in here?
Yeah, anything that the deputies will collect off the street, like she said, if it's a narcotics case, an assault case, found property case, we'll get a handgun, we'll get a revolver, which is kind of like the old school people think of the Western style firearms. We get long guns, like a shotgun or a rifle. I know the popular AR-15s that everyone hears about, we get a lot of those on the street. And then we sometimes get the old school black powder guns that we can't do anything with.
Buffalo Bill comes in here. He can help you test them out.
Yes, those are just more of we document, we look at it, and there's really nothing that we could do. We are not properly trained in shooting a black powder gun at this time.
You don't have the costumes for it here.
That's probably what it is.
But would a black powder gun be a crime gun? I mean, I guess it could, but that's not why you guys get it, right?
The legal definition of a firearm is a device that is designed to expel a projectile or projectiles by means of explosives. So since a black powder gun is the black powder would be the explosive and it expels a projectile, it is legally a firearm.
Okay.
We just cannot shoot it. I don't believe
We're
safely
just not trained. Yeah, our facility
in the modern society.
Not trained built to shoot
Yeah.
it.
But we have a lot of collectors where we'll have a death investigation. No issues with the death investigation, but the deputies have to collect the firearms for safekeeping. We don't want firearms just left in the residence unattended.
Oh, really?
For anyone to get. So sometimes deputies will have to collect firearms at a location just for safekeeping purposes, just so someone else can't get their hands on them and use them in a crime. And a lot of times like that, we'll get just to verify and stuff, we'll get the black powder style percussion cap.
And when we say death investigation, that doesn't mean a homicide. That could be anything. That could be somebody who died of natural causes at their house. But we typically, I don't want to say typically, but a lot of times our deputies will go out there because they have to. And like I said, it's not always a homicide.
Yeah, that's correct. So, I mean, they could just go out to a death investigation of a natural causes of an older person, and crime scene won't be called to it because if it's, if the doctor will sign off on it or it's not unattended, it was, it was bound to happen. They knew, natural causes, maybe something medical, that nothing has to be investigated or researched as to why this person died. The deputy will still go out to investigate and make sure everything's okay. And they'll collect the firearms because they just can't keep them. Unless there's another owner in the house or someone in the house that's willing to take them over in possession of them. But if not, we have to store them for safekeeping just because we don't want, them to get in the hands of the wrong people.
Yeah. So I'm going to go back to when you test them and you test fire them. I mean, how does that work? I want to explain this a little bit because, like I said, when you look at the room here, it looks just like a door, but behind that door, there's a range. It's not super long. I mean, it's several yards, right? But it's not like it's 100 yards.
About the size of a very, very, very nice walk-in closet.
All right. Yeah. And so when you shoot it, I mean, do you shoot it at like a wall or a target or how does that work?
We have it's kind of like a snail trap water tank. Water flows down to kind of help stop the projectile. And then the acceleration of the projectile slows down by the snail in a circular motion. And then the projectile just...
To help our listeners visualize this.
Yes. I'm like, I don't know how to explain this visually.
Basically, it's a very long closet, like I said. Think of, if you've ever been to any gun range, just think of one single lane of a gun range. And then at the end of the range, instead of just having a back catch wall, as many ranges do, we have a ramp that is designed to deflect the projectile towards this very small opening in the back. And that small opening opens into a larger, like a drum, where the design of the snail trap is basically the projectile continues to tumble around in that drum until it just loses momentum and just plops down to the bottom of the water tank.
And then do you collect that?
At that point, they're not of evidentiary value anymore.
Oh, okay.
Yes, we don't collect the projectiles on that aspect. That was really good explaining that.
Yeah, that's good.
Good. I was a little worried. I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to explain this.
Is it loud when you shoot it?
It can be.
Depending on the caliber we're shooting, it can be loud. We have to forewarn our office that we're shooting, and sometimes depending on where they're at in the office.
The back end of the snail trap where the projectiles end up is actually like just separated by a reinforced wall, but that's right next to it is our garage, and sometimes our CSIs will be in there processing a major case vehicle, and they'll just be really surprised when we start shooting.
I can imagine. I mean, you're just sitting there doing your work, and all of a sudden you hear gunshots going off. But you said you usually shoot two, right? Two
per gun.
Two per gun.
Okay. 2 rounds of ammunition per firearm.
Do you usually shoot at least one a day? I mean, do you get that many in that you would at least shoot 1 or 2 a day? Or do you try to do them like all in, okay, I got to go shoot these 9 guns today?
We try to do them in batches. We get a weekly gun drop-off from the evidence section. So our evidence section's not located at Central Ops. It's located down the street.
Okay.
So we have someone that comes once a week, pretty much on Wednesdays. We call it our Wednesday gun drop-off. And they'll drop off every gun or every firearm that they've received from the deputies for the past couple weeks to give to us. We'll sign for them and we'll start working them. But we try to do them in a bulk, shooting, because just getting the tank turned on, getting everything ready, to shoot. It's just a little bit easier to shoot a few more guns at a time than just one or two.
So where do you get the bullets from? Are they already in the gun, or do you have to buy bullets for all of them?
We actually buy ammunition. It's our lab ammunition. We're not supposed to use the ammunition that comes with the gun because we don't know if it's ever been altered or just been
Reloaded.
Reloaded. I'm like, what's the word?
That makes sense.
Some people like to do reloads, and since we can't confirm it's been reloaded or not, we just use our own specific lab ammunition.
Okay. So I like I said earlier, you probably get a variety of guns. So you've probably, both of you between you have probably shot dozens, if not hundreds, of different kinds of guns. I mean, is it? This sounds like a bad question, but is it kind of fun to shoot them though?
Every now and then we'll get something unusual and be like, oh, you got to shoot this one too.
Yeah, it's
I'm sure you mostly get handguns, I would assume.
We do, and 9mm seems to be our targeted caliber. That I don't know if it's just the ammunition is cheaper to get or easier to get.
It is the most common, I think.
So we get a lot of 9mm. So when we do get that, 50 caliber or that nice
Desert Eagle, that
Desert
you see
Eagle,
in the movies.
We will be like, oh, let's both of us shoot it just to see what it feels like.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's research.
Yes, it's definitely research.
Training.
Yeah, it's training purposes.
We're still trying to get to be able to do full auto in here. Once in a while, we'll get a full auto firearm, but we're still only allowed to shoot 2 at a time in there. I don't know if they really want us to shoot an entire magazine at full auto, but
oh no.
In training, we did a couple full autos when we did training at FDLE, and they let us do a couple more rounds in the full auto, and that's pretty fun.
Yeah. Do either of you go shooting outside of work or not?
I do not go shooting outside of work anymore. No.
Did you before?
Once in a blue moon, I did. My husband likes to shoot, and so I would go shooting with him. But like I said before, I wasn't really the biggest firearm person before I came in here. So it wasn't like the biggest thing for me to do. Like I know some people like to do shooting as like a sport and a hobby. But now that we do it all the time in here, it's kind of one of those things. It's like, doing crime scene. Everyone's like, oh, do you watch the show or do you do this? It's like, no, I do it every day. So it's not something I want to do on my downtime.
Same as you, Mila. Do you shoot after work?
I do not too much, actually. Maybe once in a blue moon. I never really shot that much, like Amanda said before. So I enjoy it. I just don't make time for it.
Okay.
And I actually don't even own my own gun.
How often so let's say it's gone through the process, do the owners ever get their guns back? Or the ones that you test and that are maybe crime guns, do they get them back or not? I guess it might depend on what their case ends up like.
Yeah, it depends on the circumstance of the case. Because we're civilianized in here in the forensics unit, we don't have the capability of releasing the firearm back. Once we're done with it, we're done with it. There's nothing more we can do with it, so it will go back to evidence. If the charges have been dropped, or if the case has gone to trial and the statute of limitations or anything is up like that, and the owner wants it back, the deputy who originally collected the firearm would have to do a property release for that to determine if it could go back to the owner or not. I believe before they release it, they make sure the owner's not a convicted felon or there's no charges where they're not allowed to have it back. And then it can get released. We've actually had a few guns get released, and then we've seen them come back a couple years later.
Really?
Not intentionally because it went back to a bad owner, just, sometimes guns on the street, get in the wrong person's hands and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Well, a lot of times we work guns that were stolen during like a burglary or something, and following the final disposition of the case, even if the bad guy who was in possession of that stolen gun is found guilty, the original owner of the firearm does have a right to have his gun back. So after the final disposition of the case, he can get his gun back, and then if it gets stolen again and used in a crime again, that's when we can also see these reoccurrences.
Okay, so what happens if somebody doesn't pick up their gun? Do you know? I mean, does it eventually get melted down or sold or?
Yes. So I'm not sure what our ruling is for how many years we have to keep guns. It depends on the crime and the circumstance of the case. But our evidence section will eventually make a list for destruction after so many years to destroy the guns if they can't get in contact with the potential owner. What will happen is we will get a list, our agency will get a list of all the firearms that they're ready to destroy. They will go to our range, which is where the sworn personnel do all of their qualifying, shooting, and stuff out on the range.
I need to get out there for a podcast. We did a SWAT team one, but I need to talk to the range folks out there too.
So they get first dibs on the gun list, and if there's anything that they want to convert to the agency or to use, a lot of times they'll get the Glock types, or they'll get the shotguns or the rifles that are in good condition. They'll request to get those and convert them over. We will then get the list for us, and we'll use it for our reference collection. We have about 650 reference guns right now in our reference collection here to use.
What does that mean?
So we have a reference collection of just old crime guns that are sitting there. So if we ever need a part or a piece for it, or if we just want to examine the firearm, say we have the same make and model type firearm, and we want to see if something's been altered with it, we can go in our reference collection, see if we have that same exact make and model, and look at that one and function test that one and see if the one we're trying to function test is done properly. And there's nothing wrong with it.
I imagine like this Batman weapons closet where you just, I got to pick that one here. And
not
that one
nearly
there.
as fun looking.
Yes, we only have about 650. And after, if we don't want any of them, then the Florida Department of Law Enforcement will get access, which their reference collection is amazing. They have a lot of firearms for their reference collection.
So how did both of you learn this? I mean, did you take classes specifically on firearms? Did you learn on the job? Do you go to conferences? How do you learn about all these different sort of things that have to do with firearms and guns?
When you start here as a crime scene investigator, we do train the crime scene investigators. We do a one-day training on safety and functionality of the firearms, because the CSIs do have to render the firearm safe if it's a call that they go on. So they need to know kind of the basics of what to look for, how to document it. And then just being in this section, it's kind of, if you're in the forensics unit, a position in here opens up. It's kind of an internal thing. You got to have the forensics background. And then we did hands-on training with the Florida Department of Law Enforcement to get our full-on training to be in here, which is a couple-month program.
Okay.
We also try to stay up to date with things. We'll sign ourselves up for a lot of armorer classes so that we can familiarize ourselves with different types of guns that are more commonly in circulation these days.
So since you've been doing this 3 years and 2 years here in the firearms, does anything surprise you?
All the time.
like what? Like what surprises you?
Well, every now and then you just get a gun you've never seen before, or you'll get a gun that's just so old that you don't even, like, the basic firearm safety rules always apply, but sometimes it's just like, I'm not sure if this gun is supposed to do this or not.
Yeah.
How about you, Matt? Does anything surprise you?
I mean, day to day, it is just kind of like a crime scene. You get, every time you open the box, you don't know what you're going to get, kind of. You know, it may say it's a pistol, and then you open it up, and it's something completely different. People like to alter theirs differently. Some of them, even just on the painting and the markings, you know, they like to have that. They like to paint their firearms or put specific things to add-ons to it, and some of that alone is just, you know, kind of funny to see what people like to do with their firearms to make it unique.
Do both of you get to keep up on what happens afterwards? And what I mean by that is, you know, once you've tested it, once you've shot it, and then it goes back into wherever it goes until maybe a trial, do you ever follow up and say, oh, maybe what I did made sure that person went away for a crime they did? I mean, do you know the outcome of your work?
Not particularly like when we were out in crime scene, because we were doing a lot more for the case with the function testing of the firearm and entering it into the database. Unless there's a potential association match to it, a lot of times if it's just possession by a felon or carrying concealed, the state will either charge them with that, and they might just take a plea deal or something. So there's not something specific always that we're helping in that aspect of it, unless there's a potential association.
Okay, so
to
what's the future of this? I mean, where does firearms specialists go from here?
Well, we just did get our NIBIN database, and we also got the correlation database. We got a grant last year that we finally got our machine on. FDLE was doing all of that for us, and now that we have it, we're hoping that we can start doing our own examinations and not need the state lab anymore. So we can say that this gun does match this casing, or this projectile does match this projectile.
Over the years, can you think of one firearm that you've shot that you were like, whoa, like that was pretty intense?
I mean, I would definitely say probably the 50 caliber Desert Eagle was pretty intense for me.
Was that both of you two, Mila?
That was a good one. I think some of the higher caliber rifles too were a lot more bang for my buck than I expected. But I actually enjoy shooting those. So I don't know. Something about them little girl, big gun. It's a lot of fun.
Well, I'm going to leave it. I think that is a good way to end the podcast right there. Little girl with a big gun. Well, Amanda, Mila, thank you so much for chatting with me. And thank you all for listening to Behind the Star. And we'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening. Don't forget to subscribe to Behind the Star. You can find us wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Also, follow us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube. Until next time, I'm Jon Busdeker, and this is Behind the Star.